someone is burdened with anxiety, the best way for them to not collapse by the weight of that anxiety is to have someone to transfer the anxiety to. That is what happens when people don't like you or can't stand you. They have an expectation that is not met. And because this expectation that's not met is something they've invested in, now they experience the anxiety of not having this expectation met. For them to look within, they need to face the anxiety and need to face the fact that they have invested in an idol. This is something most people just don't want to do. So they hold on to expectations that are not sustainable. So when a challenge comes to that expectation, what happens is that they now look for a target to transfer their anxieties onto. That is what not liking someone or not standing someone all comes down to. Your expectation is challenged, and anxiety of this challenge you want to transfer onto someone else. That is all it is. But this transferring of anxiety onto someone else is illegitimate because it's your expectation that you invest in. If you have been conditioned by your parents to think that way, that's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. But now that you're older, you're able to self-reflect and to purge yourself from negative expectations. A negative expectation is an expectation that can't be sustained. A negative expectation is an expectation that will pollute you in the long run. You have the ability to see through expectations that you've been acclimatized to. That is what you ought to do while growing up and through your adult life. It's quite strange, but most adults don't want to do this. They don't. They just want to be left alone. Or in other words, they don't want the responsibility to challenge their own expectations. Why? Because they don't want to let go. To let go means giving up control. So, in order to not collapse mentally and as a group, as a society, they need people that they can victimize. That's how they maintain their collective as well as individual sanity, by having someone to victimize. That's why they need to justify their violence. When someone doesn't like you, it is because they say you think you're something. They can't explain why it's a crime for you to think you're something. They just say you think you're something, and you're not allowed to think you're something. That's why you committed a crime. That's why they have a right to violate you. Or they would say, well, you remind me of someone I don't like, which is a dumb reason. They have to come up with some type of excuse for their violence, because to be openly violent means to be openly destructive. And nobody in their right mind can justify open destruction. Even people who are mentally ill cannot justify open destruction. Let's say you're out there and you see someone picking up rocks and destroying windows. The police would come and arrest you and ask you, why are you breaking those windows? Then you need to give a justification why you're breaking those windows. Because there's nothing constructive nor beneficial with destroying windows by throwing rocks all the time. People may get hurt. The glass that is broken will spread on the streets, and people and animals can get hurt. So there's nothing constructive about just throwing in windows, breaking them with rocks. Why making all the effort to carry all those rocks just to destroy windows? There's no way to justify this, nor to expect others to put up with it. But then, if you come up with an excuse saying, well, they're conducting experiments on the little babies over there, Then the police may think, okay, we're going to look at it. And let's say it's true, then you will still be charged for vandalism, but they won't charge you that much because indeed there was something grievous going on. But what if there is nothing grievous going on and you're just throwing in windows just for the fact that you are destructive and you expect others to put up with it? Of course, nobody's going to tolerate it. And of course, you won't be able to get away with it. And of course, you openly saying that you just want to be destructive and destroy things. Nobody wants to be around you. You won't be able to have social interaction. Without social interaction, you can't have a job, you can't have an income, you can't have food, so you'll die. Even if you were able to get food and water and all of that, you will still die and mentally fall apart because you need social connection with others. So the fact alone that you are a vulnerable and social creature implies that you can't be openly destructive. Nobody can. Even if you have a bunch of reprobates together, they can't be at ease with one another if everyone is openly destructive. They need to have some type of justification so they can relieve themselves mentally for what they're doing. So evil, as well as unrighteousness, they're not sustainable. They are not. They can only, they can only delay their termination by feeding off others. It is as someone who has a terminal illness and their bodies are about to collapse, and by taking some drug over and over again, they prolong their lifespan. That is how the world is. The world, or you can call it society, can only remain in existence at the expense of victims. So, people that are part of society must agree with the victimization, because without the victimization, you have no society. And in order to be part of the victimization, there must be some excuse or quote-unquote reason why the victimization needs to happen. So now you understand that some people just don't want solutions. When someone does not want to face the anxiety within, when someone doesn't want to face the fact that they may not be correct about what they've invested in, the moment someone doesn't want to be real, that means that they've automatically chosen to become delusional. They may not be delusional right now, but they are becoming delusional in the future. Why? Because they've refused to be real. When someone has refused to be real, that itself will bring anxiety, because the reality will challenge you all the time. For this is a very extreme example. Let's say someone has decided that the sky is pink. Every morning that they wake up and go outside, they see a blue sky. So they're challenged every day. So if they keep holding on to the idea that the sky is pink, what's going to happen? Mentally, they will collapse very soon, because reality will always challenge them. If someone says something as, well, that oil and water mix well together, well, put water in a bottle, oil, and you see they don't mix that well together. So reality will always challenge you when your expectations are not sustainable. Human beings without Christ, that means worldly people, they manage to continue in expectations that are negative because they enable one another. And they can only enable one another at the expense of scapegoats. We can say selected victims. So, once you understand this about the world, you will never go into discussion nor arguments with worldly people again. Why? Because many of them have forfeited being reasonable, they have forfeited being realistic, and they have forfeited being constructive. Forfeiting to be constructive simply means you're not interested in solutions. You just want to be left alone, you just want relief. What can you do with such people? You can't live for them on the long term, because sooner or later, this toxicity of theirs will cause trouble. That is why As a believer, you must know what you are dealing with. Believers should not hold on to the fables of the world. The fables of the world are there to hide the victimization that's going on. Because without the victimization, you have no society. Without society, you have no collective nor individual relief. And without society, they have no option but to face themselves. And when they have to face themselves and there is no way out, they will mentally decompose, they will emotionally fall apart, and will turn into domestic violence and mass civil unrest. Worldly people need victims to charge their frustrations upon. Without it, they cannot remain functional, and without it, they can't remain sane. That is why they need to become born again, renewed in their mind to rely on Christ. But a lot of older people are proud. They don't want to admit that they are defective. They don't want to admit that they are dysfunctional, and they don't want to admit that they need to be reliant on someone else. They want to be proud. They want to be self-reliant. But this self-reliance does not exist. But the only way to give an appearance as if this self-reliance is real is by having someone else to blame and someone else to victimize. And here's the thing. If there are no victims anymore, they are still left with one another, and then they'll turn on one another. So they need to have victims. Without victims, they cannot exist. When there are victims, they can feel powerful. When there are victims, they can feel self-righteous. When there are victims, they can feel relief because at least they're not as worse off as the victims are. When there are victims, they have a reason to be antisocial. They have a reason to be cowards. Without victims, the world cannot function. So, when you notice injustice in the world, don't go into discussion nor arguments with those that enable or perpetrate injustice, because they have chosen. 9 out of 10 times they have chosen to be unjust. They have chosen to remain in darkness. They have chosen to remain sick, and they have chosen to perpetrate their doom onto the rest of the human species. They are damned by their own effort. They're not damned because they have no choice. They're damned because they don't want to comply with solutions. So now, their damnation, they want everyone in it so that they don't have to feel bad about them being damned. Because they're only damned because they are damning themselves. That is why religious organizations always come with some kind of guilt tripping to trap you in their damnation. Religion has nothing to do with spirituality, even though people confuse the two, and religion is designed to hide the victimization of society. That is what it's about. And politics is there to give the justification for the victimization. So in politics, the victimization is quote-unquote justified, and in religion, it is covered up. And in the entertainment industry, the victims that can't remain hidden are glorified as celebrities, which also serves the purpose to hide what's really going on. All of that is to provide narcissistic supply to the community. Because without this narcissistic supply, worldly people fall apart mentally, and they'll turn on one another. So, the gospel is a threat to the world. Because when the gospel is preached and Christ-centered values as human rights, that means the intrinsic value of human beings, which also implies our national obligation to look after one another. When all of those values are promoted, how are you going to victimize people then under such an influence? You can't. The only way you can continue to victimize people is when you pretend to be on God's side and that you're doing God's will by victimizing those that bring trouble. So you have to convince others that the victims are causing trouble, and that's why they need to be victimized to keep everything in check. That's the only way you can get away with the victimization under the influence of the gospel. That's why pagan Christianity claims to be Christian. That's why the Catholic system has to maintain a Christian face. That is how the world is. That's why, as a believer, do not cast your pearls before swine. Do not invest in the improvement of people that are dedicated to lose. If someone is dedicated to lose, they will always pretend as if they're doing the opposite. There is this black scholar who is the center of contention in the black community at the moment. I'm not going to mention his name, but this black scholar came with a parable. We have manure flies. Those are flies that hang around excrement, dung, and feces. You get what I'm saying. And those flies go right to the dung and they feed off of it directly. And he compared negative-minded people to manure flies. He called them human manure flies, stating that the manure fly goes right to the dung or to the excrement to feed off of it. But humans who feed off of negativity or rely on victimization better, such people cannot openly admit they rely on victimization, because they would be shutting themselves down. They would be embarrassing themselves, and they would be humiliating themselves if they would openly say that. So they do get off, or better said, they do relieve themselves at the expense of victims, but they have to pretend as if they're doing the opposite. And that's how it goes with reprobates. A reprobate will seldom openly admit that they just want to vampirize others because they don't want to be responsible for anything nor anyone. If a reprobate would ever admit this, other reprobates would turn on him or turn on her, because it's not sustainable. People that are dedicated to lose, they will always pretend as if they're dedicated to win. Why? They do this just to trick others into sponsoring and supporting them, and then they feed off of the support and sympathy and also empathy of others. They'll be draining others just to extend their own lifespan, just to prevent themselves from collapsing. And while doing that, they are causing the collapse and the sickness of others. But as long as they are relieved, that's all that matters. When someone is dedicated to lose, they will want your investment. But you only give the investment because you think those people want solutions. But when you look at the bigger picture and you look at how they function, you realize that they don't want any solution at all. So don't cast your pearls before swine, because they only want your pearls just so they can trample upon those pearls to later devour you. They just want an excuse to unload whatever contention that's building up inside of them. That's all they're looking for. But they can't just come and just explode. No, they have to have some quote-unquote justification for exploding. So don't give them an excuse, or don't enable their excuses. Just shake them off of you. Be at peace.